clear we have the strongest economy in the world. That's a fact. 15 million new jobs created in 3.5 years. Unemployment hasn't been this low for this long for 50 years. Wages are rising. Instead of importing foreign products, we're exporting American jobs.
Yeah, you are, aren't you? Exporting American jobs. That was Biden yesterday. Where was he talking? He was talking. Yeah. That was he made some campaign stop. Welcome back to the show. Dana Lash with you, top of the second hour. They're exporting American jobs. I asked this question on X yesterday evening. And I genuinely I am very curious and fascinated by the answers here. And you all out there gave me some really good answers. Because I didn't live through Carter. And I keep hearing, I hear about how bad Carter was, and how bad his administration was. And you hear about the gas lines. And I'm very familiar with his foreign policy. I've read 2 biographies on him. One was a little more neutral. One was highly critical. I think it's kind of hard to not read a super critical one on him. And it seemed as though there was this consensus that, of modern day presidents, Jimmy Carter was the worst. And I was thinking, is it because I have recency bias, having, a lot of us, most of us out there. I mean, I think some of you out there maybe were teenagers with Carter. Some of you were adults with Carter, but a lot of us were not. And, Biden seems like the closest thing we have to something, to a president who is that bad on the economy and foreign policy. And I was trying to put it in perspective, like who was the worst? So for the people who lived through Carter, if you could compare Carter to Biden, who would be the worst? And this is what I asked last night, and it has about 6,000 responses. I'm still going through the responses. And I've been bookmarking some of them because it's been very interesting. Like, for instance, on the issue of the economy, there were some really good points that some of you made. Like when Carter left office, for instance, and this was one that was interesting, double-digit inflation, that was the thing that everybody talked about, double-digit inflation. And apparently when Carter left office, it was about 11%. And that was 5 presidents before Barack Obama removed from that equation food and energy. Now, under the same metric, Biden's inflation is closer to 18%. That's interesting. And then they took food and energy out of that equation. And it's some were saying that it was so bad under Carter, it required a Republican revolution to save the nation. And then there were others who were saying that, the economic recession wasn't as bad as the economy today. There were more jobs, or are more jobs available now, but the inflation is particularly devastating for younger generations. Someone said Biden is a criminal, Carter was just a commie, which I thought was interesting. We're going over, if you're joining the program, I'd asked everyone last night, for the people who lived through Carter, who is worse, Carter or Biden? So again, welcome to the program. Dana Lash with you, top of this first hour. Second hour. Thank you. It's a long Friday. Second hour, top of the second hour. Some said that they believed that Carter was actually a Christian. I don't know. The only Carter I know is the old Carter. I've never seen him give a speech. The only stuff that I've seen him, speeches I've seen him give, are old stuff on YouTube. Some were saying that they felt that at least Carter was trying to kind of be decent back when decency was still something that Democrats valued. And someone else said, Biden, Carter didn't hate us. I thought that was interesting. Now, the foreign policy, for instance, Carter opened up China. Someone replied to the United States and tried to kill farming before the climate hoax. And then, of course, there was the giving away of the Panama Canal, which who runs the entity that runs Panama Canal? China, CCP. And others said that Carter was an incompetent fool who still at least loved his country, but Biden's far worse. It's not even close. So it's fascinating to see the responses to this. And a lot of people who lived, the people who have the experience of having lived through Carter, they don't excuse the bad job that he did, but they think that his motivations and character are different than that of Biden's. And that makes some sense. This has just been it's been fascinating to read all of the responses, and I'm still going through them. And I mean, I guess it's kind of also difficult to tell who would be the worst because I don't believe, have seen the full consequence of Biden's policies yet. Is that something? Wouldn't you agree with that, Kane? I don't think we've seen the full effect of it yet.
No. We'll see it in a decade. We'll still be feeling this stuff.
And could a Republican revolution save the nation? I mean, is it just that simple?
We have a blueprint for it. I mean,
Well,
if
we
you,
do,
if you
yeah.
look back, we have a blueprint for it.
We were talking on break about how Reagan, one of the first things he did was tax cuts. And I mean, that just kick-started the economy. And for all the people who got mad at him, it was interesting because when I was going back, and I talked about this on air before, and I've written some stuff about this, he incorporated a lot of the John F. Kennedy economic approaches in the Art Laffer approach with the tax cuts here that Reagan implemented. And I mean, you saw government revenue surge because people had more of their own money. You saw investment. You saw just an explosion in terms of business expansion, small businesses. And it very much was the old-time JFK sort of approach. Back when Democrats, in the 60s, at least understood economic freedom, and they weren't completely compromised. But this has been very interesting. And I wanted to compare the both of them because they seem very, very similar. Carter historically to me, and then Biden. But then also, one of the reasons I wanted to compare them is, well, we know what it took to get out from Carter. But is that enough to get out from Biden? And the destruction wrought by his policies. Is that enough? And government, someone else made a very good point. Government wasn't as big back then. So how much of the equation does that change? In your mind, Kane, doesn't that, I think that changes the equation quite a bit.
Absolutely does.
So to me, that suggests you need a little bit more than just a Republican revolution.
Yeah, it's a larger problem to deal with today.
And I don't know if we have if the Republicans as a party have the spine to do what's needed to be done. You have to have serious austerity in order to really accomplish what needs to be accomplished in terms of just stopping this economic slide into oblivion.